All right, folks, we'll kick off with this next one. So this next pest has been biting the lower North Island quite a bit recently, and no, it's not an alligator, but alligator weed. And our next talk, we've got Jim Mitford-Taylor from Greater Wellington Regional Council, and he's talking about the challenges of alligator weed control with the Hutt River Flood Resilience Project. Jim.
Thanks so much for that introduction. Kia ora koutou, everybody. Ko Jim maho. My name's Jim. Thank you all for joining me today. Nursing those hangovers. Hopefully they're not too bad. Thanks so much for coming along. I'm a biosecurity officer in the pest plants team at Greater Wellington Regional Council. I've been working in the pest plant space for about 5 years now, and I'm still highly passionate about weeds, and I relish all the opportunities I get to work on a new species like alligator weed. So this presentation is going to detail, as Michael said, the challenging but informative journey that I've been on over the last year with alligator weed control. And I'll be focusing on how we completed manual excavation to control a site that was discovered in July 2024 last year while completing a survey along the Awa Kairangi, the Hutt River, as part of the RiverLink Flood Resilience Project, located in Lower Hutt. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, probably rare because we've had so many talks so far about it, but alligator weed is a very hardy herbaceous plant with hollow stems, small white flowers, and its native range was originally restricted to the Rio Parana, which is South America's second largest river, found about there. It's considered a major threat to native biodiversity. It can outcompete slower growing native species and become a pretty problematic weed in aquatic environments where it can form large floating mats and that can quickly alter watercourses, as you can see there. Now, because of human activities, it's since become established in more than 30 countries, found on all continents aside from Antarctica, and it tolerates a wide range of soil pHs, salinities, and nutrient-rich to nutrient-poor conditions. It readily grows in drier terrestrial sites, the brackish waters of the mangrove swamps, as people in the Auckland region can attest to, and even free-floating on freshwater bodies. Its herbicide resistance and ability to regrow from fragments at depths buried of more than 30 centimeters make it really challenging to deal with. And the people responsible for its management are the biosecurity officers at the regional councils across the region. Greater Wellington has 2 pest plant teams, one located in Masterton and the other one in Upper Hutt. I'm based on the Upper Hutt side. You can kind of see where we're located with that gold star on the map there. And our Upper Hutt team looks after the western side, sort of shown roughly there on the map. And a core responsibility of biosecurity officers, such as myself, is to manage those species listed under our Regional Pest Management Plan, or RPMP. Greater Wellington's RPMP manages pests under 4 different programs: exclusion program, the highest priority, and obviously the lowest being sustained control. Now, the 3 plants that we have listed under our exclusion program are alligator weed, Nacella tussock, and Chilean needlegrass. You can kind of see them there, highlighting alligator weed as our highest priority, and our goal is, as per the name, to exclude them completely from the region. Now, when our RPMP was published in 2019, there was no recorded instances of any alligator weed or any of these species in the region. However, in August 2022, our pest plants team encountered the first exclusion species in the region when an alligator weed site was first discovered in Taita in Lower Hutt. Then a second site was discovered 3.6 kilometers away in Nainai, Lower Hutt, in May 2023. And then the next was found 4.3 kilometers away in Melling, Lower Hutt, on the 5th of July last year by me. That's a photo of it there. Now, it was discovered when the RiverLink project manager reached out to us at the pest plants team at Greater Wellington in order to complete a survey of the intended RiverLink project area in order to satisfy their obligations under their ecology management plan. And having just started working at Greater Wellington 6 months prior, I happily volunteered for that inspection, blissfully unaware of how much work I'd signed myself up for. And that area that we surveyed is shown in red, as you can see on the left in that image. And that had previously had residential homes that were demolished in 2023 in preparation for future work on the stop bank, which is, as you can see, where that photo is taken from. Ideally, they were going to, or they are planning on increasing the overall size and shape, reshaping it to improve that flood resilience and protection for the residential homes. The Riverlink project, for some context, has actually been in planning since 2001, way back when, with groundwork starting in 2023 recently. It's a $1.5 billion project that aims to improve numerous aspects of Awa Kairangi, the Hutt River. And this image shown above is a rendition of what it's proposed to look like when it's finished construction in 2027. The project scope is enormous, and our alligator weed work for this presentation is centered in this tiny little area. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. The alligator weed was found in what used to be the backyard of a private property, and there were 3 distinct patches. One main one growing through the fence, and 2 smaller satellite infestations. When Greater Wellington had controlled alligator weed in the past, we had employed the use of chemical control using mainly 2 herbicides. People are pretty familiar with these, metsulfuron and glyphosate, or manually digging and excavating it that way, and then sifting out root fragments. But unfortunately, these methods often proved only to be partially effective. So I sought external advice and reached out to staff at Horizons Regional Council, NIWA, Manaki Whenua Leg Care Research, and the weeds team at Ag Research, really trying to see who's actually had successes with this and how I could learn from those. And I want to thank all of those organizations for their advice. Everybody got back to me, and specifically to Deborah Hackle from Ag Research, who actually produced that alligator weed ute guide that everyone's kind of familiar with that just recently got released. And she suggested using a metsulfuron-only mix, then waiting a week before completing another spray using only glyphosate. However, by far, the main recommendation was to dig it out. And the bigger the excavator you can get, the better. So I decided to do both. While we organized manual excavation of those sites, I completed spraying, following those recommendations from Deborah Hackle. And these images show how that large patch against the fence looked 6 weeks post-spraying. The above-ground stems were almost fully dead, with a small fraction holding some color, but most looking sickly and dry. And this is how the 2 smaller patches looked 6 weeks post-spraying. The exact same treatment, the exact same wait time. But I believe factors like high soil moisture, obviously you can see standing water there, heavy shade from other broadleaf plants caused the control to be almost completely ineffective. And you can see even some active growth from some lateral shoots as well. This is sort of what affirmed our decision to excavate the entire site. But before we could begin excavation, we need to estimate the volume of soil that we needed to remove. So, after digging a test hole in the center of the largest patch and carefully following a lot of the roots, several larger roots down, it took a couple hours, they narrowed quite considerably. But at a depth of 1.25 meters, they still continued deeper into the ground, past what I could reach with a hand down in the hole. So to be safe, we would need to excavate at least a depth of 1.5 meters. And after running those numbers, the estimated volume of soil that we would need to excavate would be about 50 cubic meters. And for according to some reputable online sources, 1 cubic meter of moderately damp soil weighs between 1.3 to 1.7 tons. So, using the median weight of 1.5, we're looking at 75 tons of soil that we need to excavate just from this tiny couple patches. And so far, I thought it's pretty smooth sailing, you know? We had calculated the amount of soil. The site had easy access from a main road. We had contractors nearby that were skilled in the use of excavators. And most importantly, we had the reassurance that all the management costs associated with control of alligator weed, or any exclusion species, was explicitly mentioned within Riverlink's exclusion or ecology management plan, meaning we could essentially operate on their dime. It's the perfect thing that you want to hear. So we just needed to organize where we were going to take that soil. The only landfill that had experience in this kind of disposal was located in the Horizons region, Bonnie Glen landfill in Martin. And because of alligator weed's ability to readily regrow after burial, a strict disposal procedure called special cell disposal is the main way that you have to dispose of it. This is essentially where you dig an extremely deep hole, and that's dug right before the truck that comes to dispose of it arrives, and then it's dumped and then immediately covered up. It's actually the same way that they dispose of police contraband, which I found out during this process. And when the regional council disposed of alligator weed that they'd taken out of the Mangone stream, they used this same Bonnie Glen landfill. And that disposal pit was 16 meters deep, just to put it into perspective. That's a photo of the disposal from you guys there in the Horizons region. Now, Greater Wellington had used Bonnie Glen landfill in the past. However, in that instance, it was disposing of less than 1 ton of material. We had an estimated 75 tons of soil, and the tipper truck for Bonnie Glen could only hold a maximum of 5 tons. So we would theoretically need to make 15 round trips from Lower Hutt to Martin, assuming a perfect 8:30 a.m. start, no traffic, minimal time at the landfill. The maximum number of trips possible in one day would be 2, meaning that it would take 8 working days with no delays to achieve this. And with one round trip coming in at 320 kilometers, 15 would equate to 4,800 kilometers. So instead of driving the equivalent distance of 1.2 times the length of Australia, we needed a better plan. After reaching out to all of the landfills within the Wellington region and pleading our case, Spicer Landfill in Porirua was the only one that agreed to work with us. Shout out to Spicer Landfill. However, they couldn't do special cell disposal because by law they had to adhere to a strict excavation depth of no more than 2 meters. And this is actually because of smell. They have strict bylaws that prevent them from unearthing anything more than that because it would break that smell. And everybody complains about it, and they're essentially looking at a lawsuit if they break that. So the alternative solution that we agreed to was to line up our disposal with the landfill's 6-week cycle of moving the tip face. So when they moved to put rubbish in a new area, we would dispose of the alligator weed at the very bottom of that pit, after which layers of rubbish would be piled on top. So they would create a pit enclosed on 3 sides with earthen buns and lined with black polythene sheets, then covered with a few meters of dirt to seal it initially, and then every day you're getting about 1 to 2 meters of rubbish piled on top of it. And at the end, you're looking at about 15 meters of rubbish, fully sealing off that alligator weed that's disposed of. And that's just in a 6-week period. So that brings us to September 2024, 2 months since the discovery of the site. We'd successfully organized disposal, contracted Arb Innovations, shown here, to complete the digging, and I felt well organized. I referred back to the very comprehensive 90-page Australian alligator weed guide, published by New South Wales Department of Primary Industries, which I'd found early on in the journey. This is where I made my first mistake. I followed the advice found on page 32 of this report, advising that when a new site is found, local government authorities must notify state government authorities. I figured the New Zealand equivalent of a state authority would be MPI. So I asked my team leader if we needed to notify them, who then reached out. And we quickly got a response from MPI telling us that we needed to stop all work and apply for a Section 52 exemption of the Biosecurity Act as we were transporting an unwanted organism, and the wording in our RPMP was deemed insufficient by their legal team. So fanning the flames of this chaos, I had also received word from Riverlink's demolition team that they were planning on completing concrete slab removal around the alligator weed in 2 weeks. More than a little bit stressed, we urgently reached out to Greater Wellington's legal team, who ended up sending out an email with plenty of legal jargon, which essentially translated to, hey, I don't agree with anything that you're saying, and our RPMP is airtight. So the lesson here, after weeks of stress to get that email, is don't ask permission to do your job. Because after passing on that email, we just didn't hear back from MPI. So moving on, we started work in October 2024, absolutely hustling to make up for lost time. And the 3 alligator weed sites I outlined with spray paint, as you can see there, including an additional 50-centimeter buffer, just in case they had some additional runners. And we stitched together some black polythene sheets using duct tape to make a liner for the bed of the tipper truck. And this would ensure that we could mitigate the risk of fragments sticking to the bed when we were disposing of it. The soil was then loaded in, being careful not to exceed the weight limit of 16 tons, and then taping it up for transport. However, the first day we only managed to take 2 loads to the landfill, with a combined weight totaling 28 tons. So we needed to improve our process again. So the next day, I organized another disposal permit through Spicer Landfill, this time booking 2 tipper trucks so we could double our productivity, working at the same time, and resumed. And to ensure we weren't missing any fragments or deep roots, I periodically inspected the bottom of the pit every 15 centimeters of additional excavation depth. And strangely enough, when smaller pieces of root material were encountered, smell was the best way that I found to differentiate between them. Sounds weird, but when you smell the taproots of brassica species compared to alligator weed, brassicas smell, as expected, like cabbage or turnip, whereas the alligator weed smelled a little bit sweet and mild. Very strange thing I caught myself doing. We managed to dispose of 6 truckloads on that second day, and that equaled 78 tons of material. And on the third day and final day, we took 4 truckloads of material, equating to 39 tons. So if you're keeping math in your head, you might recall that I initially estimated the weight for all excavated soil to be 75 tons. This was completely wrong. Sweet. And the total weight of all soil ended up being 145. And I believe that this discrepancy resulted from a couple different factors. The changes to how we dug, we couldn't just dig straight down, we needed to dig outward and smooth the edges of the pits to actually prevent the collapse and subsuming of the sides and reduce the risk of anybody falling in. We also increased excavation depth to 170 centimeters. And the soil was probably more wet than we first anticipated. So, at $346 per ton, the final disposal cost totaled a cool $54,217, excluding labor, materials, and administrative work. But we reached the end. On the 7th of November, 2024, the last few loads of alligator weed were disposed of and covered with dirt and are now sitting beneath 15 meters of rubbish in Spicer landfill. Since then, I've been periodically monitoring the site, and so far, no trace of alligator weed has been found. But only time's going to tell. All right, one less site to deal with, bringing us down to 2 known for the region. Huge victory. Well, guess what? Wrong again. While conducting our normal operations alongside this 8-month Riverlink project, our team found 4 new alligator weed sites in Lower Hutt and Johnsonville. So while our journey with the Riverlink alligator weed site might be over, there's still a significant amount of work to do on the horizon. And our team is keeping the pressure up regularly, completing control and inspection of these sites, monitoring invasion pathways, and contributing to social media campaigns to raise awareness, so that one day we can be alligator weed free once again. Thank you so much.
Thanks,